The Super Nintendo defined 16-bit gaming, selling over 49 million units worldwide and building a library packed with legends. But not every great platformer made it into that spotlight. Some got buried under bigger names, others never even left Japan. These are 12 Super Nintendo platformers still worth tracking down today. 1995 gave the Super Nintendo some of its all-time classics: Chrono Trigger, Donkey Kong Country 2, Ristar, and then a flood of licensed cash-ins to fill out the shelf space around them. SWAT cats had every piece needed to rise above that pile. It just never quite got there. You picked between T-Bone, the stronger of the two with a bazooka that could blast through walls, or Razor, faster and armed with a jetpack that opened up shortcuts T-Bone couldn't touch. Both started painfully weak, and the game leaned on an experience system that took its sweet time paying off. Attacks didn't really evolve until around level 30, which meant a long, grindy stretch of short-range hits with hit detection that missed more than it should have. Where the game actually shined was level design. Almost every stage offered multiple paths depending on which character you brought, and the scenarios were wildly inventive. An amusement park level, a trip back in time, stuff that didn't feel boxed in by a typical licensed game. The shooter segments dragged, but everything else showed real ambition. SWAT Cats beat most of its licensed competition without much effort, and the developers clearly knew where the pain points were. The game showers you in extra lives right before its toughest stretches, but surviving the early grind is a real ask, and never quite becomes the game it was so clearly capable of being. Banpresto kept reinventing the Compati hero formula with every entry, overhead action, brawlers, and now a full side-scrolling Mega Man X clone. It borrowed heavily and everyone knew it, but the Great Battle 4 still carved out its own identity within that shadow. All four heroes came back sharper than ever. Gundam was the versatile pick with a grenade launcher and brief hover ability. Fighter Roa played almost beat for beat like Mega Man with a double jump. Kamen Rider brought wall kicks and slides that nobody else had, and Ultraman hit hardest with his bazooka, while curling into a ball to squeeze through tight passages. Level design backed all of it up beautifully. A space station infiltration during a fiery crash, an overwhelming jungle ambush, even a Wild West world that clashed wonderfully with giant robots. Boss fights occasionally escalated into full Voltron-style mech showdowns, aggressive and genuinely tense. Weapon upgrades were the one weak spot. Some got noticeably worse at higher levels. Kamen Rider's flamethrower stayed useless even maxed out, and getting hit reset your power back to default, which stung more than it should have against tougher bosses. Still, this held up as one of the stronger Mega Man X-style games on the system, flaws and all, and each hero felt genuinely worth mastering rather than just window dressing on the roster select screen. Sony was publishing games long before the PlayStation existed, and almost none of it stuck around in memory, except Skyblazer. It kept popping up on hidden gem lists for years, and after finally playing through it, that reputation was earned. Sky, descendant of a sky god, set out to rescue a kidnapped sorceress across 17 stages, pulled together into a Super Mario World-style overworld map. Combat leaned on a punch combo, rather than jumping on enemies. But the real hook was Sky's growing arsenal of magic attacks, projectile patterns, a genuinely useful healing move, all fueled by a meter you refilled through potions. Wall climbing opened up the platforming even further, and stage variety never let up. Climbable trees, quicksand, disappearing blocks, water currents that pushed you around and demanded puzzle solving through switches, even full shooter segments where the screen auto-scrolled. The Mode 7 bonus stages and boss fights stole the show, arenas that spun and rotated in ways that still looked impressive decades later. The disappearing block sections could be brutally unforgiving, gone in a fraction of a second, and getting knocked off a wall mid-climb set you back further than it should have. Skyblazer looked fantastic across the board, and even the soundtrack's heavy Eastern influence, a little jarring at first, ended up fitting the world perfectly. Hook the movie sparked a childhood obsession with the idea of flying, and Hook the game actually delivered on that fantasy, free movement in every direction. A first for the genre at a time when Mario still meant running one way before you could even jump. You started as Peter Pan, already in the green pajamas, racing across Neverland to save his kids from Captain Hook. The overworld map tied 10 colorful levels together, snowy mountains, waterfalls, cave systems, places the movie never even touched, with pixie dust hiding a handful of secrets along mostly straightforward paths. Once Tinkerbell showed up and filled your dust meter, flying kicked in, and the animation genuinely sold that sense of freedom, easily the game's best feature. Controls felt a little stiff and floaty at first, moon jump physics and all, but they clicked after a level or two. Boss fights were the weak link, most fell in 2 or 3 hits, and the game handed out so many free lives near tough sections that stockpiling them by dying on purpose completely undercut any real challenge, especially with infinite continues backing it all up. Short at an hour or two with no save function, forcing you through the whole adventure in a single sitting, but the flying alone made every minute of it worth the trip through Neverland. Kaizou Choujin Shubibinman 0 never left Japan, and it barely even reached Japan. Only Satellaview subscribers could download it via satellite during specific broadcast windows, before Nintendo pulled the plug on the whole service in 2000. It wasn't even a direct sequel to the PC Engine games, dropping the original characters entirely while keeping the same visual style. Raida and Izuki fighting Galco's forces across a genre shift nobody expected, part platformer, part beat 'em up. That combination shouldn't have worked as well as it did. Simple jump and attack combat opened up into small combos and a chargeable special move, and levels broke away from straight left to right movement by adding vertical climbs and descents. Bosses demanded different strategies to bring down, and 2-player co-op let both players link up special attacks together, easily the game's best mode. Sprites ran a bit small and enemy variety was thin, and the soundtrack, while competent, never left much of an impression beyond getting the job done. It's the kind of game you'd dismiss based on its simple look alone, then somehow finish in one sitting without noticing the time pass. A genuine hidden gem worth carving out a weekend afternoon for, if you can find a way to play it at all. Magical Poppin' came from Polestar, a studio with barely any other credits to its name, and somehow delivered one of the best overlooked platformers on the entire SNES. It flopped in Japan anyway, met with indifference from critics, which kept it from ever getting ported, and turned it into one of the priciest carts to track down today. An unnamed princess set out with a sword and magic wand to punish the Dark Lord who stole her kingdom's power gem, opening on a genuinely charming anime-style cutscene before dropping you into a stormy night raid through the town's houses. Combat mixed sword strikes, including a pogo-style downward stab, with elemental magic spells collected level by level, fire, ice, grenades, even a Sonic-style wall climb. Levels rewarded backtracking too, lighting braziers with newly earned fire magic to open secret doors, giving the game a real sense of exploration, and most platformers in this genre skipped entirely. The grappling chain mechanic felt a little unreliable with its timing, and one mid-boss built entirely around it became the game's most frustrating fight by far. Detailed sprite work, smooth parallax scrolling, and surprisingly frequent voice acting for the era, provided by Japanese TV personality i.e. Jima, made this one of the most polished-looking games most people never played. Nangoku Shōnen Papuwa-kun never left Japan, a Super Famicom platformer based on an equally bizarre manga about a floating island invaded by creatures like a walking beanbag and an umbrella wearing a boot. You played as Shintaro, a side character in the source material, investigating alone while the rest of Papuwa Island's residents mysteriously migrated to this new land. The combat blended platforming with beat-em-up punches, a bomb-style special attack, and an unusual take on the shoulder buttons. L and R triggered slides or diagonal aerial kicks in fixed directions regardless of which way Shintaro faced, awkward at first but genuinely useful for bouncing off enemies to reach higher ground. A level-up system expanded your health bar with every defeated enemy across 8 sprawling worlds, and boss fights leaned on real pattern recognition, jumping over fire waves, deflecting projectiles back at attackers, timing aerial kicks against a giant octopus's weak point. The password system reset your level back to 1 on restart, which made picking the game back up feel harsher than just pushing through in one sitting, and vertical scrolling lagged noticeably behind the horizontal, making overhead attacks tough to spot in time. Underneath the generic platforming bones, This was consistently charming, funny, and rewarding once its patterns clicked. Konami quietly released 3 Goemon sequels on the Super Famicom, Japan only, while Western kids waited a whole console generation for a follow-up. Ganbare Goemon 2 opened with Goemon and Ebisumaru winning a lottery vacation, only to discover the whole thing was a setup by a new villain named McGinnis, who'd lifted Edo Castle into the sky. The off-the-wall humor came through clearly even without fluent Japanese. Level design here reached genuinely brilliant heights, motion-sensing lasers, rising water levels, riding a snowball that grew and shrank at specific points, even a stage across a dragon's back. Boss fights matched that creativity, mecha showdowns, dodging lasers under umbrellas, and vehicle sections on a Fisher Mouse added a real variety without draining your coin currency. 2-player co-op ran through the entire game simultaneously, chaotic and occasionally punishing when the screen scrolled away from a trapped partner, but few 16-bit co-op experiences matched how well-rounded this one felt. Town hub areas took a step back from the previous game, smaller, less interactive, missing beloved mini-games like the old 3D mazes. The new Impact mecha battles looked impressive but played stiff and overly difficult. Even with those stumbles, this stands as one of the best Super Famicom games ever made, alone or with a friend. Jaleco never had the name recognition of Capcom or Konami, but the Jajimaru series ran for 7 games in Japan, and Super Ninja-kun, its only 16-bit entry, ended up as the series' best shot at getting things right. The toolkit expanded significantly here, dashing, rolling, wall jumps, stomping enemies to pick them up and throw them, plus a spirit gauge fed by collected souls that unlocked ninja magic like a firepower doubling clone, a fire shield, and a dragon attack for the game's lone shooter stage. A new life bar changed the pacing entirely, letting you explore levels without the constant fear of instant death that plagued earlier entries. Level design stood out too, each stage built around a specific mechanic, secrets tucked away in plain sight, and a genuinely funny 16-bit art style that gave the whole series a real visual upgrade without pushing the hardware too hard. That life bar came at a cost, though. Extra heart containers were almost too easy to find, making most of the game a breeze outside of 2 genuinely tough bosses. Its short length, once a strength compared to older bloated entries in the series, also meant the fun wrapped up quicker than expected. Still, this stands as a solid, charming platformer worth tracking down, minimal text and simple mechanics making it an easy import even for players who don't read Japanese. Run Saber earned every comparison to Strider, and then earned the right to stand apart from it too. 2 cyborgs, Alan and Sheena, set out to stop a mad scientist whose supposed cure for a dying Earth was actually mutating everyone left on it, all told through the manual, since the game itself barely paused for story. The core moveset mirrored Strider closely, an upgradable energy blade, wall scaling, ledge climbing, ground slides, but Run Saber built genuinely useful variety on top of that foundation. A jumping screw attack granted brief invincibility against enemies swarming from above, a falling kick let you bounce safely off enemies below, and an alt-screen special attack cleared overwhelming crowds when things got dicey. Presentation carried just as much weight, an underrated soundtrack that shifted mood between levels. Creative boss fights, including a mid-air battle clinging to a looping fighter jet rendered in Smooth Mode 7, and rogue cyborg duels that swapped in dramatic one-on-one music like something out of an action movie. 2-player co-op gave Alan and Sheena slightly different attack angles, enough to make each feel distinct. At just 5 levels and generous with health and extra lives, it ran short and leaned easy. Not a genre-defining classic, but a genuinely excellent action platformer that earns its place among Super Nintendo hidden gems. Hagane felt like it wandered onto the SNES from a different console entirely, borrowing heavily from Shinobi 3, Strider's swordplay, and Ninja Spirit's weapon variety to build a ninja cyborg action game the system rarely attempted. CA production went on to cult status with games like Bulk Slash on Saturn, and Hagane earned that same sleeper reputation here. You cycled between 4 weapons on the fly, swords, shurikens, bombs, and an underused grapple chain, backed by a screen-clearing magic spell for chaotic moments. Boss designs were genuinely striking, a Terminator-esque nemesis, a masked sentry bot, a mid-boss who transformed from a flying girl into a wolf, then grew a Medusa tail. And the one mode, 7-stage, on a rotating exploding ship stood out as a real highlight. Sprite detail across the whole game held up impressively well. The flashier moves, somersault flips, charge attacks, flying kicks looked great but left you vulnerable at the wrong moments, and platforming demanded frame-perfect double jumps that punished anything less. Levels lacked checkpoints, sending you back to the chapter start on death, and the soundtrack rarely left an impression. Rough edges and all, this held up as a genuinely fun, inventive, forgotten, almost treasure worth the patience it demands, though its rarity and dwindling supply have since turned it into one of the more expensive carts on the system. DinoCity was easy to write off. The box art screamed harmless 90s kids game, and contemporary reviews landed just above average, never damning, never enthusiastic. A weekend rental changed that. It turned out to be a genuinely solid platformer, better than most of the generic competition crowding shelves at the time. Oddly enough, it was licensed from an obscure film, Adventures in DinoCity, which apparently did well enough overseas to warrant a Japanese developer picking it up. Timmy and Jamie got zapped into a world of anthropomorphic dinosaurs after Tribe Called the Rockies stole a piece of their parents' invention, teaming up with two friendly dinos, Rex and Tops, to get it back. Timmy and Rex fought with punch combos, while Jamie and Tops handled ranged attacks, and hopping between Rider and Dino solved simple puzzles, a clever idea that never got explored as deeply as it deserved. Level design leaned hard in Super Mario Bros. 3, branching paths through multiple blocks, each ending in a door to somewhere new, with enemy placement that rewarded exploring for secrets. The game showed most of its tricks by the halfway point, and leaned on repetition to stretch out its length, and sluggish controls made Malahid's feel consistently unfair. Worse whenever Mode 7 kicked in and slowed everything down. Flaws aside, this earned its spot above the era's forgettable platformer glut. And that brings us to the end of our list, 12 SNES platformers that aren't perfect, but are still worth playing after all these years. With emulators now, it's easier than ever, no need to hunt down or pay for a cart. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Edward, thanks for watching, God bless, and I'll see you next time.